I'm Ryan Weber. This is Kyle Sternberg. This is Montana Fabs AW4 transmission override install. It works on 88 to 2001 Jeep Cherokees. This install is specifically 97 to 01.
All right, guys, before we get started, we want to make sure you have all the right tools. We need an 18 millimeter and a 13 millimeter to remove the seat. A ratchet works just fine, but we're using an impact hammer to speed things up. To remove the dash panels, all you need is a number 2 Phillips screwdriver. To install the override plate onto your chosen location in the dash, you need an 1/8 inch twist bit, a 1/4 inch, and a 3/4 inch. And since I don't have a 3/4 inch bit, I am using a unibit. To install the umbilical wire from the override to the transmission computer, we need wire strippers, and I have 3 different kinds I'm going to use. A wire crimper, and it's important to note we are using a non-insulated wire crimps, and so we need a non-insulated crimper. I also have a pair of scissors to help remove insulation if I need to. In addition, after I'm done crimping the wires, we're going to heat shrink them. I have a little bit of aluminum foil to prevent melting other wires, and just a regular heat gun with some extra little adapters to keep from melting. If you don't have a fancy heat gun like this one, all you need is this aluminum to keep from burning your extra wires. And then finally, to install the switch, I'm using a small flat blade screwdriver and a 1/16 inch Allen wrench. Finally, if you need a little help locating the panel and drilling the holes, a punch is going to help start that bit. And then finally, flashlight. The kit contains the switch and circuit board, a knob, a cap, a backer plate to hold the switch onto your dash, a sticker, and this particular sticker is already mounted to the plate. However, the sticker comes separate from the plate so that you can use the holes from the plate to align the holes in the dashboard. And then to mount the plate onto the dashboard, there are 4 number 4 screws and 4 lock nuts. To mount the gray umbilical to the transmission computer, the kit comes with 8 non-insulated crimps and 8 heat shrinks. What we're going to do is remove the seat. While it's not really necessary to remove the seat, the transmission computer is down here on the firewall next to the gas pedal. We found it's way easier to remove the seat to help work on it because ultimately you have to stand on your head. To remove the seat, there are 2 bolts in the front, a bolt and a nut in the back. 13 millimeter for the bolts, 18 millimeter for the nut.
Oh, hang on, Kyle.
Actually,
we have the electrical connector.
Yep, that's important to get a picture of.
That's hooked up. Quick screwdriver, pop it apart. You're ready to take it apart. Don't forget, before we start cutting wires, to disconnect the battery. And also, if you're from California, Proposition 65 says this might cause reproduction harm and cancer. So make sure you wear your rubber gloves, folks.
Now that the seat's removed and the battery is disconnected, we're going to remove 3 dash panels, the kicker panel underneath the steering wheel, the cowling around the radio, and finally the main dash panel surrounding the instrument cluster. There's a 4th hidden panel that's not really a dash panel behind the kicker panel. It's metal, and we'll remove that too. There are 3 Phillips screws underneath the kicker plate and 4 Phillips behind the cowl. That's all you need. Everything else is just clips. Things will be hard to remove, but it's okay. You won't break them.
When removing the stereo bezel, a lot of times it's easier to move this transmission shifter down and out of your way. So we're going to be doing that. To start, you pull off the bottom, pull out and off.
I've removed the 3 Phillips screws underneath the kicker plate, the 3 screws and 2 clips on the top. The top clips, you just kind of have to work your way out, but they will pop out eventually. I'm removing the 2 screws that hold on this metal plate. Once I get this plate off, I will have a little bit more access to the transmission computer. There it is, back behind the wiring harness. We're working the clips around, moving the steering wheel as needed. The hardest part of removing this dash panel is getting the panel through the headlight switch. Now it's a tight fit, but you can make it through, and it's all rubber and you won't be able to break anything. We're going over here. This is the dash panel we just removed. Now we elected to install our override right here along this decorative trim. That's typically where our customers like to install it. However, you can install this anywhere there is room for this circuit board behind the panel. This is nice and easy. It's right next to your steering wheel. We like it here, but next to the shifter, anywhere else there might be room. Don't forget, you're limited by the length of this gray wire. If you do happen to need a gray wire longer than this one, give us a call and we can make you a custom one. Now that we have our plate located where we want it along this decorative trim, one of the things we found is that this decorative trim is exactly in these spots for our 1/8" holes, which tends to pull your drill bit from left to right. So we're going to clamp everything and get everything nice and tight and drill these holes, 1/8" holes, through the plastic and through the metal plate to make sure everything stays in alignment. We'll bolt the plate to the dash panel and then drill the remaining 4 holes. After you're done, this is what it should look like. And now we'll proceed drilling the next 5 holes. I'm going to drill all 3 holes with my unibit because even though we spec'd out a 1/4" drill bit, these are 3/16 holes. We want the hole in the plastic a little bit bigger so that you don't get little crescents when it lights up in the back. Also, our plate is not 3/4 inch in diameter. So we're going to use the unibit to follow in this plastic. I'm going to eyeball the center, and as the bit hits the metal, it will kind of automatically center. Now be very careful because this unibit is designed to drill through metal, and you can very quickly, without realizing it, make these holes bigger than they needed to be. In fact, I did not even make it all the way through the plastic before the step in my unibit touched the metal. So I'm just being overly careful to ensure that I don't mess up this. Because the shoulder of my unibit is still pretty shallow, I'm going to continue these 3/16 hole until I poke all the way through, get my 1/4" bit started, and then switch to the twist bit. Now I'm drilling the 3/4" hole for the switch. An important thing to note, these step bits are, especially when they get big, kind of hard to hit sometimes. You might actually overshoot it. Mine goes to 7/8, And 7/8 is the maximum size this hole can be, and the switch plate still covers it. If you do mess that up, it's not the end of the world. Nobody will ever know but you.
Little test fit here to make sure all our holes line up and that center hole is big enough for everything. We are looking pretty good right there. You can see how those LEDs are a little off center, but those holes are a little oversized. They should come together quite nice. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's just a little more information. I don't know.
Now that I've drilled all 4 holes, I reattached the plate for the final time. Now, I put the sticker on, and it's important to remember, before you put the sticker on, clean the aluminum plate very well with a solvent like brake clean. Then, as you tighten these 4 set screws, it's very important not to tighten them too much, because as I tighten these screws, I can cut through the sticker and then your sticker will start peeling off. So our recommendation is hold the Allen wrench and tighten from the back. Now that I got the holes drilled in the dash, I reinstalled the plate, and now I'm going to install the switch. Looking on the back here, there's a little indent on the switch that needs to line up with the respective hole in the plate. One nut holds it on, and it's a 10 millimeter. Okay. This is the final time we're installing this switch, so I'm going to go ahead and put the cap on. The cap is a collet style cap. There's no indication to it. You just put it on there any way that fits and tighten it up. Just quick check, everything is good. And I am all the way to the left, so it's at the D position. And when I install the cap, I can point it at the D. Now that I have the switch installed, I installed the gray wire into this connector here. There's a little detent which captures the gray wire and keeps it from getting yanked out. I'm going to install this dash piece as I install the gray wire, routing it around the various brackets inside the Jeep here. Now I'm just pulling the gray wire through because the yellow wire is the illumination wire that goes to any wire that has the dimming feature to it, which in this case is going to be our radio. Now that we have the dash installed, I'm going to route the illumination wire to the factory wiring harness behind the radio. So I'm going to remove the radio, route this wire, and crimp it into that wiring harness. Now that I pulled the radio out, I can splice this illumination wire from the override switch into the factory wiring harness. Now, the unfortunate part about all these different years of Jeeps is that these wiring colors can change for the illumination circuit. But fortunately, I looked up the instruction manual for my radio, my aftermarket radio, and it told me that the orange and white wire from the radio harness is the illumination wire. I followed that wire through the connector, and the factory color is this orange. So I'm going to cut and splice this yellow wire into the orange wire right here and put this radio back together. In the next part of this video, I'll show you how to splice and cut wires inside the override module. If you don't have the data sheet or the instruction manual from your radio or a factory wiring harness, you can use a test light to find which one of these wires is your illumination circuit. Now, I already know it's this orange wire, so I'm going to test it first by turning the battery back on and turning the headlights on and off. Now, you have to take the connector off and get your test probe in just the right spot. And Ryan's turning the switch on and off in bright and dim, and you can see the test light getting brighter and dimmer as he does that, versus other circuits which just stay the same brightness even as he turns it on and off. Okay, because I don't want to stand on my head and film this at the same time, we made a jig so I can show you how to wire and splice in the gray wire umbilical from the override switch into our Jeep transmission computer. So again, this is the computer that's right next to your gas pedal underneath the dash. And normally I'd be on my back, sitting where the seat used to be, and this is why we took out the seat, and standing on my head to reach this wiring harness, but it's much easier out here on the bench. If you have a lift, it's much easier to use the lift. I like to actually stand while installing this. In the instructions, we have a picture of this connector and all of the corresponding wire colors. And in addition, we have a graph that shows which colors I'm going to be splicing into in the wiring harness for my particular year. This computer is from a 2001 Jeep, and the colors associated with my gray wire. In the chart, there is 4 wires that we're going to cut and splice: power, ground, solenoid 1, solenoid 2. The 2 solenoid wires have a computer side and a vehicle side spec'd out in the instructions. And that's important for which wire in my gray wiring harness I connect to the respective wire. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is unplug the connector and strip the factory wiring loom so I have a little bit more room to splice these wires. I just got a cheap $2 pair of scissors to cut this, it's just electrical tape, back a couple inches. Now I'm using scissors because if I try to use an X-Acto knife, and even if I put the blade away from the wires, I'm still going to nick those wires as they twist through the wiring harnesses. Scissors, especially pointy ones like this, I can get under the wiring harness and cut without risk clipping the wires. Okay, now I've stripped the factory wiring harness back about 3 inches. This gives me plenty of room to sort these wires out. Plus, when I cut them, I'm going to put the heat shrink on the wire before I crimp the wire, and it lets me get the heat shrink far enough away so I have room with my crimper. Using the chart and the instructions, I'm going to find the wires I need. And for an 01 Cherokee, I have a white wire, an orange wire with a white stripe, a dark blue wire with a white stripe, and a black wire with a tan stripe. Here's my brown wire, or my black wire with a tan wire. Sorry, it looks brown in real life. This is a tough one and why you need light underneath your Jeep. I'm going to separate that as best I can. I have a dark blue with a white. I have a solid white. I have an orange with a white stripe. Those are my 4 wires. It's important to note that there are actually 2 blue wires with a white stripe. In the instructions, we have a map of this connector. We've circled the wires we use and the number associated with them. And if you can you can look really close, and on the back of this wire, 1, 13, etc. are labeled. However, it's pretty unlikely you're going to be able to see that, so you can just follow the instructions and avoid the secondary dark blue and white wire, which is pin number 11. So here it is, pin number 11, dark blue with a white stripe, dark blue with a white stripe. The one we're concerned about cutting is pin 26, which is conveniently labeled on the diagram, and it is in the lower right corner. And in addition, as another double check, I am cutting pin 24, 26, 25, 24. 25 is the pink wire. 12 and 13, which are on the opposite corner, white and orange. I'm going to cut them about 1.5 inches up. I would like to get further away, but the farther away I get from the connector, the deeper I get into the brackets, and it's more difficult to splice. I'm going to do one wire at a time just to keep from getting confused. Doesn't matter which one you start with, but I'll start with the blue and with the white stripe. Now that I've cut the wire, I need to strip it about 1/4 inch. I prefer using an X-Acto knife in this case because it's nice and small inside and behind the brackets of the Jeep. Now, there are two difficulties associated with an X-Acto knife. One, cutting your thumb. Two is cutting all of the little strands of my wire. So it's easier to work with, but also runs some extra risks. I have this regular auto parts store wiring harness, or crimpers. I'll use that for the other side. Now I'm crimping now I am stripping my brown wire. Now I can strip them all one at a time. Sometimes it's easier to do that first before you start crimping everything together. In this case, my Okay, the blue wire just so happens to be fused ignition switch, so that is our power. Using my chart on the instructions, it is the red wire on the
Umbilical.
On the umbilical. Thank you, Ryan. Since my gray wire comes in from the top here, I'm going to start with the vehicle side of this wiring harness, twist them together, and crimp on my fitting. Now, I haven't put my heat shrink on yet because it's actually easier to do it on the second crimp. Heat shrink. There's my connection. And this is the same connection that you would use for crimping the yellow wire into your factory harness for the radio. No need to heat shrink yet. We'll do that all at once at the end.
Especially since your battery's disconnected.
Just gonna go ahead and do this one right now.
Black wire, ground. Goes to the black and tan out of the wiring harness.
Okay, now that we have spliced in the power and ground connections where all 3 wires connect to the same node, we're going to move to the solenoid. I've already cut the orange wire and spliced 1 connector to the computer side. Now, it's important to remember, after I've cut this wire, this side connected to the connector is the computer side. The other orange and white wire is in the wiring harness, and that is the vehicle side. That's the nomenclature that we use in our instructions to differentiate the 2 different sides for our gray wire umbilical. Ryan's going to go ahead and read me the computer side, which color of the gray wire associated with that.
The orange and white wire from the computer side goes to the brown wire on the umbilical AW4.
Don't forget your heat shrink. Moving on, I'm going to connect the vehicle side of the orange and white wire.
The orange and white wire from the vehicle side goes to the green wire from the umbilical.
I can't say it enough. Don't forget the heat shrink. Green wire. Oops. My last wire is the white wire. That's solenoid 1. Again, I'm starting with the computer side.
The white wire on the computer side goes to the white wire on the override umbilical.
Heat shrink. When using this style of crimpers, they have cutters built into them. Make sure you don't cut another wire as you're crimping the wire you're interested in. All right, our last wire is the white wire on the vehicle side.
That is connected to the blue wire of the override umbilical.
Great, because that's the last wire I have left. Okay, now that I have all of the wires connected, I'm going to heat shrink them. Just going to line up the heat shrink with the respective connector. Ideally, I'd like to do all 6 at a time because it minimizes heat on this wiring harness. However, because these 2 are sticking out a little bit, I'm going to do them separate. This heat gun actually has a protector to keep the heat from hitting other wires and melting them. The heat shrink that comes with this kit is actually adhesive lined, so it has a little bit of hot glue built into it. And as you melt everything, you can see some of the hot glue melt and come out. But be careful not to get it too hot. I'm just going to squeeze the small wire just a little bit to ensure it's a nice, tight connection. I didn't get that one perfectly centered, but as long as it's hot, it's still a little compliant, and I can get it around the connector. Can you pull that off? Now I realize not everybody has a heat gun with that nice convenient heat shield. So I'm going to use just a little piece of tin foil as a heat spreader to protect the other wires in the wiring harness from melting when I shrink all of these pieces at the same time. So I'm just wrapping it around the other wires. And realigning. I took the heat spreader off of my heat gun. I'm finishing up all of them at once. Now that I have all of the heat shrunk, in summary, the white wire on the computer side goes to the white wire on the umbilical. The orange with the white stripe on the computer side goes to the brown on the umbilical. The white on the vehicle side goes to the blue on the umbilical. The orange with the white stripe goes to the green on the umbilical. Power and ground, the blue with the white stripe connected to slot 26. All three are connected together. The red connects to that node there. And finally, ground, which is a black with a tan stripe, connects to the black on the umbilical. All three together. Okay, now that I've connected all of the heat shrink, connected the plug back up to the computer, I'm just going to shore it up a little bit with some heat or with some zip ties just to keep everything nice and tidy. Okay, now that we've connected this wiring harness, all we need to do is put the dash back together the way it came apart. Again, it's 7 screws and a couple of clips and you're done. Reconnect the battery and you're off to the races.